Bless up, guys. Yannick Reid here, and I want to welcome you back to a One Par podcast. And this is episode 3. And just doing some housekeeping, I want to thank everybody who's tuned in to the last 2 episodes and given me a whole lot of feedback. I want to give a special shout out to all the listeners outside of Jamaica. I really appreciate you guys logging in because I mostly expected just Jamaicans to be listening, but I know that there are Jamaicans outside of Jamaica listening, as well as non-Jamaicans who are just outside of Jamaica listening to the podcast. I was in Europe for the past month, and a good number of persons came up to me and said that they're loving the content of the podcast. So I just want to tell you guys so much thanks for just tuning in and coming up to me and telling me, because that's the type of person I am. I really appreciate it, and it motivates me to keep this content going. Of course, I can't skip the Jamaicans who are listening to this podcast. Big up everybody who is listening, who is watching, who pushes up the views, who recommends it to a friend, who engages on social media. Trust me, every single comment, if you guys have noticed, I try to respond to everybody because, as I say every single time, it's very important that this is worth your time because it's me and you apart. Yeah? Okay, so let's dive right into this episode. Depending on when you're listening to this episode, it's either right before Jamaica Carnival or right after Jamaica Carnival. So I'm looking forward to hearing what you guys think or what your experiences was regarding Carnival. But for those who are tired of hearing about Carnival, you can rejoice because today's episode has nothing to do with Carnival or soca. While contemplating for a topic for this episode, I've had the topic of talking about AI and the role it plays in creativity, especially in the Jamaican creative space. This is a topic that I've had on my mind since episode 1, and I wanted to take my time to explore it, as I know it's a very hot topic. I know it's also a very sensitive topic right now. And I want to be really careful about how I talk about it and how I discuss it with you guys, because I know that it is a sensitive topic for a lot of people. So I've avoided speaking about AI online generally because of just how heated people are about it. And as you know, that this podcast that I've created here is really to dive into nuanced takes and try our best to really dissect these things, not look at things in a black or white manner, but really try to explore them in a balanced manner. I don't think there's a single person right now who's alive who hasn't heard something about AI. ChatGPT took storm a couple years back, and it's crazy to even say a couple years back because time is just moving so fast. And now we have just reached a point of just so much AI. Like, AI is in everything. AI is in your fridge. AI is in your car. LLMs everywhere, image generation. And we just kind of want to talk about how that has impacted the space. And I guess just my thoughts on it. And I'm looking forward to hearing what you guys are going to respond with. I'm going to target the elephant in the room, I think I actually should start, for transparency, is that I am a user of AI in different forms, and I'll get into that. But I want to be transparent in our discussion so you know where I stand or have an idea of what I'm doing. I don't want to be duplicitous in any way. So I am a user of AI. AI is technology that is being inserted into so many different steps of the creative process. And I don't love all of the iterations of AI, but one thing with me as a creative person is that I think it's important to have an understanding of the industry and where the industry is going, and have an understanding of just what different people are using. Whether I decide that they will be incorporated into my workflow or not is a different thing. But I think it's very important to know what is in the space. And in knowing what is in the space, again, the elephant in the room is the big thing about AI. I'd say the one big thing is its negative impact on the environment. That's a huge thing that can't be ignored. The amount of clean water that it uses, as well as how many different data centers have to be built to accommodate the growing use of artificial intelligence that kind of, just results in more industrial buildings being built that are literally just housing these servers and this mass use of potable water and energy, as well as with image and video generation, just the whole aspect of copyright and intellectual property, and the fact that these AIs have been trained on the World Wide Web and people's intellectual property, mostly without their permission. So I definitely have a awareness of that impact, and definitely those are 2 points that I am aware of and I'm not fond of. Other points that definitely exist in the conversation is just the argument of how AI is making things soulless. AI is definitely introducing laziness to people. It's not incentivizing people to use critical thinking like one time. Also, we have to be reminded that AI isn't infallible. So, sometimes these AIs actually produce incorrect results and people are not fact checking them. So people are just going with information that can be wholly inaccurate. For some of the people who may be listening who are not really understanding what I'm saying in terms about the environmental usage, is that these AI programs and bots and softwares is that they use a lot of processing power. Like, you can just call it like it uses a good amount of energy. And this energy is not being consumed on your device, like say your laptop or your phone. It is being sent up into the cloud. So it's being sent through the internet, and a request is being sent at a remote location. So let's just say the remote location, let's say Texas or Philadelphia, and they have these data centers, these large buildings that have a bunch of motherboards. So just call it almost like the motherboards that are inside a computer, along with RAM. Remember, we discussed RAM, and it's just like, the amount of seats in the car. But RAM is basically just something that is helping to power these things. So there's millions of people around the globe who are using these AI chatbots and stuff like that, or just AI technologies that require this large amount of processing power. So all of these requests are coming into these data centers. So it's generating a lot of power at that location. So, in generating all of this power, it also generates a whole lot of heat. And to cool these devices, you ever using your phone and your phone get really hot? How these devices are cooled is that they are cooled with clean water. Obviously, it's not the water is going directly onto it, but I'm not sure the exact process, but it is a process by which, the water is evaporated and sent through like cooling mechanisms to basically compensate for the amount of heat that is being generated by these things. Because once these boards start to heat, they malfunction. So they have to stay at an operating temperature level to generate effectively. So the problem with this is that you can't use salt water, you can't use dirty water. You essentially have to use clean water. And we all know that clean water is a precious and finite resource that, human life as well as all life on the planet needs. And AI is not life. So the large consumption of this drinking water for the use of this AI is definitely a negative impact on the environment. And rightfully so, many people, including myself, take issue with that. I definitely do feel uncomfortable with the amount of usage that these data centers use. So I know somebody's gonna ask, okay, Yannick, and a lot of people say AI is not worth it, or knowing what you know, why would you continue to use AI? So my hope, and I want to be honest that I do think this is a naive hope, but there is some research that kind of supports this take, is that I'm hoping that AI is still relatively new technology. New technology, a lot of times, new technology, its first few iterations are rather rough around the edges and they can be rather inefficient. What my hope is that through the development of this technology, we can get through the inefficient elements and develop it into a more efficient element. Some people may come at me and say the powers that be are not incentivized to make AI more efficient in its energy consumption. And trust me, I take that because I know that these are tech billionaires who they just care about their bottom dollar. But what I'd like to believe based on history, there are some technologies that have come about that were inefficient in their origin. Refrigerators and air conditioning, when they were first invented, they were really bad for the ozone layer. They used to emit these things called CFCs. And then basically, globally, there's this thing called the Montreal Protocol, which was one of the first really important environmentally friendly treaties, stated that the chemicals and stuff that were in fridges had to change for just the benefit of the globe. So, enough people cannot live without AC. And many people, like a fridge is like a basic home essential. There's just a point where, those two technologies had a really negative impact on the environment. And just due to regulations, we were able to bring them down to a place where their footprint is much, much less. In the 80s, I think, soaps and detergents, they used to have these things called phosphates. So basically, the same thing that would help to clean your clothes and, make dirt, these phosphates, they make dirt stick to them and wash off of your clothes. When these things started to, them go down your drain and hit the river, it was causing this whole thing where it would just basically turned clean river water into just sewage. It would just clump up and it was damaging fish and wildlife and all sorts of stuff. And then they had replaced them with different formulas, I think in the 70s. So it wasn't the 80s. So they replaced those formulas. I don't remember what they're called, but that was a big deal in terms of, just making them also way less harmful. So we're talking about soap and detergent, essential things, not body soap, but soap for washing clothes, essentially. Another thing that most people may be more familiar with is aerosol spray. We know how bad it was for the atmosphere, but aerosol sprays, a lot of them now, instead of the harmful chemicals that were in there, I think substances that they use now is propane, butane, and like compressed air. So it's still bad, but it has again come down significantly. And the final thing, something everybody is familiar with is cars. You know what I mean? Before, if you've ever been to a gas station and say unleaded and wonder why there isn't leaded gas, there used to be leaded gas. Leaded gas was really, really bad for the environment. It was toxic, even toxic to humans. And then actually, it was like a gradual rule out of leaded gas. And it's just in 2021, there's a global ban on using leaded gas in cars. So as you can see now, we have electrical vehicles as well as you would be familiar with unleaded gas, which is way better for the environment. So I list all of these things that are just now commonplace that used to be very terrible, that some have come down in terms of the impact on the environment. So knowing what I know about AI is my hope is that it will go through a similar change where, maybe they will find other methods to, cool these AI centers. I think that they've already started, not the leaders, but some people are, finding ways to cool them with recycled water, to cool them with sand and some other stuff. So my hope is that problem will be addressed. So the other problem in terms of plagiarism, for the sake of time, I think I want to take on this topic by kind of going into how do I use AI, or where are the instances in terms of using AI that I have felt is useful. And I think I will cover the whole plagiarism aspect through that process. Okay, so my use of AI without a windy preamble of when I started or whatever. So as you know, there's different types of AI. My most common used type of AI is LLM, which stands for large language model, which most people would be familiar in the form of ChatGPT, a chatbot, something that you'd speak to. The first thing that I found particularly useful with using these LLMs, and I know some people will agree and disagree, is helping me to learn how to do certain things. And I honestly think this is like a very good use of AI, like genuinely. So especially if you're in a creative field, right? If anybody who is using Photoshop or works in film or photography, I think you'll understand where I'm coming from. When you are learning these things at any stage, there is technical jargon that refers to certain things like aperture or ISO or threshold, or just you can spew a whole bunch of terminology, right? And when you're starting out, you don't know what an aperture is. You don't know what a threshold filter is. You don't know what frequency separation is. So you may understand something that you want to achieve, like say in Photoshop, there is an effect that you want to do, but you have no idea what the name of the effect is. So, how do you search for something that you don't know what the name of it is? And that is a problem that I've had as a creative for a long time. You see something and I say, oh, I wonder how I can get that little effect where, you know, the person kind of look like a thing, but not like a thing. Obviously, I'm not making sense. With an LLM now, you are able to find out things with technical jargon because Google at the time wasn't made to do that. So if I, like say, threshold is an effect that allows an image to be completely black and white, not grayscale, but black or white. And you Google how to make image sharp, black and white. That's the best way you could possibly describe it. And you'd really have to go through a whole different threads of forums to kind of figure out what it is you're looking for, because the effect is called threshold. But all the topics that we'll be talking about this effect would be calling it threshold, but you don't know that it's called threshold. So it's hard for you to find it. An LLM now is designed in a way where you can speak in natural language and say, hey, in Photoshop, when you want to create a strictly black and white image that's not grayscale, what is that called? And an LLM can really help you to figure out what these various terminologies are. I know that has helped me so much in terms of learning about different things. Like you'd see it and you know it, but you don't know what it's called. So I have learned so many different techniques or things by names, especially in film, where I just say, oh, what does this thing mean? And it just tells you what it is. Obviously, there is a huge value in searching for things and the process of learning and hunting for information. And I'm definitely for that. You know what I mean? I'm a member of Reddit for like 13 years, and I actually enjoy crawling through forums and learning things. But anyone who knows, like, who's trying to achieve a project and you have a limited amount of time, when you are trying to find something but you don't know what it's called, it can be extremely frustrating. An actual thing that I've actually found value in with LLMs is teaching me how to use software. So, at one point I had no idea how to use Google Sheets. I shouldn't say I had no idea, but basically I had a job where I was a marketing manager, and my responsibility was balancing a marketing budget using Google spreadsheets. And I definitely didn't have that skill. So I it forced me to basically learn how to do it. And a lot of different formulas in terms of, like, the sum and stuff like that, I just couldn't remember. I don't know what they are. Same thing like I'm talking about with the Photoshop, where you just don't know, okay, how can is there a way? You know what I mean? Like, you just have no direction of where to go. And some of these YouTube tutorials can be really counterproductive, where you're just sitting through, and you can sit through a 15-minute video and reach at the end and you still didn't get the information that you were hoping to get. I just kept asking LLM, okay, what formula can I use to fill this row? What formula can I use to balance this? What formula can I use to, and asking enough times, after a while, I actually started to pick up on the different formulas, equal sum, equal this, equal that, or even some that I don't even say common people use. So I moved from a point where I was definitely intimidated by opening a spreadsheet to a point now where I love spreadsheets. I love doing budgets. I really feel good about being able to balance things in budgets now, and it's a skill that now I don't need to use ChatGPT or any LLM to support me, because just through the process of learning it and doing it, it's actually stuck with me. And yeah, I could have definitely probably achieved that with a YouTube video, but even just the way I learn, which I think is really important, the way I learned specifically, and I think others learn like this. I really have to understand why something is done, and I ask a lot of questions. And sometimes a YouTube video it can be a very linear experience, where somebody is teaching something and you don't always get the opportunity to ask questions, and you don't always get the opportunity to ask a very specific question that may pertain to what you're dealing with. It's just the information, and then you kind of have to go from there. I really have to understand, or it's really important for me to understand why I have to do something. When I understand why I have to do something, it anchors into my mind a little bit more, because, okay, this is the reason you're doing it, as opposed to just repeating something that someone did. And with that learning style, I've just had the opportunity so much times to just get further information. Okay, why would I do it this way? Is there any alternative way that can do it? What's the most common way? Is there any alternative? What's the advantages, disadvantages? And I have found LLMs to be really helpful in something like that. And I think I want to make a point right here about AI overall. I think the most important point is, I personally believe that AI is a multiplier. AI is a multiplier. Is that if you have a goal or an intention or something that you want to achieve, AI is a tool, and it's a tool that can multiply the effort that you have. So, like multiplication, if you multiply 2 times 2, you get 4. But if you multiply 0 times 2, you get 0. So I think that's where a lot of the AI slop comes from. If you don't have an original thought, you don't have an original goal, you don't have an original intention, you're not trying to achieve something that came from you, So if it's going from just AI to finished product, I'm not in support of that, and that's not helpful. That's not useful. I am in support of AI multiplying ideas, intentions, and goals to help them to be expanded, to help organize them, to help make them more effective in a way that brings you closer to your goal. I think that's what my experience has been like. I've also been able to use AI to help me learn how to code. I've been experimenting in code, and I think people have different intentions of vibe coding. Like some people obviously have nefarious intentions and some people don't. I definitely personally think this is one of the better uses of AI, as I think coding, or the ability to bring to life software that is uniquely designed to solve a unique problem. I think it's almost like speaking a language. I think it is valuable for anybody to learn. So I can give you an example of software I built. So I was able to build an app for iPhone. I haven't released it. It's just something that I use because I had this problem, right? I had a problem where I would go to the supermarket and I would buy a product for $100. I'd go home and I'd come back next month and I would go and I'd see that product and it would say $120. And I can't remember for the life of me what I paid for it before. And I was like, I'm pretty sure this has gone up in price, but I just didn't have any way of kind of really figuring it out. So I knew I had that unique problem that I wanted to solve. And I said, all right, let me try out this app thing. And I made myself an app that basically allows me to track the prices of things that I buy. So say it's cheese, I can log in and say, okay, cool, this is Anchor cheese. I bought it on May 1st for $100. And then I can go back to the supermarket on April 1st. I can open the app and I can say Anchor cheese and say that I bought it on May 1st for $100. And I bought it on February 1st for $80. And I can keep updating and basically build a database of the fluctuating prices of things. It was a very fun experiment because it went from just tracking that prices as well as I could add different vendors. So I can say I bought it from this grocery store for this price on May 1st, and I bought it from this grocery store at this price on February 1st. And the app, I could design it that it could tell me the last place I bought the cheese from and the cheapest price across the board, or just which place had the lowest price. So obviously, that's not a huge problem for anybody. But for me, especially as somebody with ADHD and an unreliable memory, that was really awesome. It was really a very interesting process, kind of just learning the whole thing, going through. Some people, their intention is going to be, all right, how can I sell this app, or how can I make money off of this app? Which I think with well intention, it can work as a business. But for me, I was just excited at the ability to make software that solved problems for myself as well as people around me. My dad, he has issues making invoices. So I was able to make an invoicing app for Mac that was specifically tailored to him, at his age, what he needed. It's basically just for him. So it already has his name, all of his information and stuff, and he just needs to input the variables per job he does, and it just generates a PDF specifically for him. So obviously that's not going to be of use for anybody else, but it was really awesome to be able to solve a problem for a loved one using code with the assistance of AI. I was able to build a small app within a spreadsheet that I use to balance my finances, to basically make an interface, a small interface that would come up so I can input my expenses. So it's easy for me to put, okay, I deposited this amount on this date, and it would just balance the spreadsheet for me. After that applet was built, I don't have to kind of go into ChatGPT to ask it anything. I can just input my expenses into a spreadsheet. That has been such a life improvement in terms of my financial tracking. You don't understand. And the last big thing in terms of LLMs was a big problem I had. If some of you know, I have a apparel brand, or just a brand that has an apparel arm called Vericulture. And it was really hard for me to figure out how to just balance all the prices across different regions. So meaning we ship to the US, we ship to Europe, we ship around the globe. It was a really tough process. So the important part is I would write down everything. I would write down how much an envelope costs, how much it costs to make a shirt, how much it costs to buy a shirt, what's the price of this, what's the price of the transport. I go to the post office, I write down all of the prices, and I just had this big wealth of information, right? But me and my ADHD brain, I just had such a hard time figuring out how to connect all of the dots between them. Conversion rates, the packaging, the shirts, the cost per shirt. You have to buy this amount to do that. It genuinely, it caused me a lot of grief as a business owner. And people would ask me, yo, when is international shipping coming? And I was just so stuck as to how to figure this thing out, until one day I just took the notebook that I had, because I wrote everything down, and I wrote down all of the variables. I wrote down all of the costs, all of the variables. I wrote them all down into one big PDF. And I put this PDF in an LLM. I told it what I was trying to achieve. It took a bunch of prompts back and forth in to basically say, okay, this is what I'm trying to achieve. I'd like to have a website that has US, local, Europe. And what an LLM was able to do, and almost what it is designed to do, is that it has a greater breadth of processing power to consider all of these factors, because I'm no whiz at math. I'm not great at math. But it was able to consider all of these things, conversions. I would also input, rounding things up, profit, loss, all of these things. And it was able to really break down all of the different factors that I needed to consider to basically help me to figure out, this is how much you'll be able to sell this shirt for in the US. This is how much you'll be able to sell it for in the UK. This is how much you'll be able to sell it in Europe. And this will be your profit margin per shirt. And this is what you will have to do. This is how many shirts you'll have to sell per month based on how much you make for it to be profitable. I know this podcast will end and some people's stance will not change on AI. And my intention is not to make you like AI. My intention is to just talk about it. Honestly, the amount of relief, because there wasn't anybody I could ask. There isn't anybody I could help. My situation was so unique. And I'm sure there's a human that existed that could help me solve my problem. But it's a small business. We never have any bag of money to hire an accountant or a business development manager who could figure everything out. As well as, frankly, truth be told, I didn't trust anybody like that with my baby. And just being able to spend like a day just parsing through all this information and just technology being able to just map everything together, it was life changing. And I actually moved from not being able to ship internationally to having shipped at least a couple things internationally that same year. I don't know if I could have made that hurdle without that assistance. And I just tell all of these stories just to kind of really talk about, because I know some people have said, yo, I haven't really seen AI do anything substantial. And I can totally understand people's take on that. But I have had a bunch of experiences, especially as an ADHD person, where it has helped me so much in terms of, even sometimes you can even try this. iPhone, I'm not sure if Android can do this. You can make a voice note, and on iOS, you get a transcript with your voice note. So sometimes I'd have like a really complex set of ideas. And in my experience, especially with ADHD, it's sometimes hard for me to have my ideas come in a linear format, which I'm sure you're seeing listening to me on this podcast. So sometimes I may have the end of the idea before the beginning of the idea, before the middle of the idea, but I have the idea. I'll be able to just kind of do what I call a brain dump into a voice note. I'd extract the transcript, which is the written part of my brain dump, and I can drop it into an LLM. And this is what an LLM is designed to do. It's a large language model. It can take apart what you're saying and say, okay, this is good for the start. This is good for the middle. This is good for the end. And that is invaluable. I cannot understate how much that has helped me so many times move from inaction or concept into actually feeling confident to move into execution. And maybe it's more valuable for me because, I am neurodivergent and just the way my brain works. But even in interacting with a lot of people who don't see themselves as neurodivergent, I see where some of these same methods I feel like would really help them. But, I know some people who are totally against the idea of AI, or just feel like using AI is like a crutch, which I can understand. And I want to talk about that as well, because as I said, AI is a multiplier. So you do have some people who, again, are saying they just go straight to AI. And these are some of the things that I don't like. I don't like going to AI and saying, give me 5 photography ideas. I don't want AI to help me to direct my creativity. So you have some people who they will even have conversations with people, take the conversation, put it in AI and said, how can I respond to this? And just respond. An awful experience that I have had, knowing, because in my use of AI, I am able to see where people are using AI. You may be working with a producer or an agency, and you can tell that the whole creative brief was written with AI. And I don't have a problem if you use AI to help you, as again, it's a multiplier. But you can just read the brief and you can tell that it is just something that is coming straight out of a chat GPT or a Gemini, because a lot of the bullet points don't directly apply to the specific project that we're talking about. So if you aren't looking on the creative and saying, okay, we have to shoot 4 models, to our dark skin, to our light skin, this is the audience that we need a stylist, and actually having an understanding of what's going on. If you're just going into Gemini and saying, build a brief for a photo shoot with 4 models for a clothing brand, bruh, you are gonna just get straight garbage. And I don't know if it's hypocritical, but that's the stuff that I don't like, because, again, tools are made to support you. Tools aren't supposed to take over from you. That stuff definitely is a poor and annoying use of AI, because it's so backwards, especially the creative brief thing. When you get a creative brief that you are supposed to follow, and you can tell that the person who has put it together has inputted nothing into the LLM, and they have no understanding of the project, you now send me or whoever onto a project where the objective is not even tailor made to the thing. You know what I mean? Instagram captions where there's no context of what the actual image above it is. It's just give me a caption for this, that, that. In any situation that requires communication and interaction with people, humans must be involved. Meaning, if I want to communicate something visually with somebody, if I want to sell a product to a demographic, if I want some music to connect with some people, humans resonate with things that are made by humans. And I believe that humans must stay in that process. So obviously, if you want to resonate with a human being, the most effective thing that you can do is create something as a human with human feelings and human intentions. That is super important. When you pass off human interaction or what is designed to be interacting with humans to a robot, to technology, then that is what I consider to be AI slop, because it doesn't connect. And more, as someone who works in the creative industry, I can see where people are picking up on content that is made with AI. I'm not generally a fan of, you know, generation, like image generation. I'm not really a big fan of it because, one, I definitely do think it functions a lot more as a crutch than something intentional that helps. You know, I'm a photographer, so obviously I'm invested in going out and taking photos. I also enjoy going out and taking photos. I do understand where there are some situations where a specific photo is needed and just cannot be obtained. And generating it is super helpful. I totally understand it. It's not lost on me. You know what I don't like is that a lot of these models have been trained on people's hard work. There are some platforms like Adobe that are trained on images that are licensed to be trained on AI, meaning I take this picture, I give it to Adobe. I say, Adobe, here you can train your AI on this image. So it has been done with permission. I think that's cooler, but most of the good models are not trained on images that are licensed to do this. So, you know, on a large scale, it is theft. I don't support that. I understand why people do it. You know, like if you don't have any money to get some models to, you know, do a shoot and you can do it with AI, totally understand how you would be enticed by that. What I just find is that instead of it again being a multiplier, people are using it as a replacement. And I'm definitely seeing now where you have a bunch of these chat GPT flyers where they all look the same. And it's reaching a point where humans can detect that this flyer was made in chat GPT, and it just goes back to humans making something. It's funny. The day of me recording this podcast, a friend of mine had sent me a flyer that was sent in his work chat that was obviously made by one of the workers of the company. And trust me, it was not designed elegantly in any way. But I said to him, you know what? I appreciate this. This is charming because someone, even though they didn't have the talent to make it or the skill, they sat down, and you can even see, even in its poor design, you can see that someone sat down with some enthusiasm, with some exuberance and some vibes, and just crafted together this poorly made flyer. And it made me stop long enough to look at it. Like, I'm just happy it wasn't made in Chat GPT, because as soon as I see the Chat GPT flyer, I instantly skip. I instantly gloss it over, as well as I personally believe that how you treat your brand and your communication says a lot about you. If what you need to communicate is just down to generating something generic in chat gpt, it's actually reaching a phase where people can pick that up. They can pick up the just the cheapness of that execution, and then what you communicate to people is that you have a cheap brand, or you have a brand that is what you think of the brand, that the best thing that you can do for yourself is a chat gpt flyer. I feel like a semi to poorly made Canva flyer right now in this economy, it has more heart, more pulling power than a chat GPT flyer. Because as I said, that poorly made flyer, I read all of it because I just felt good knowing that a human made this instead of just going into chat GPT. They cared. You know what I mean? It didn't look elegant, but there was care about it. And I think that is just a super important element right now when we're thinking about how we're going to be using AI, especially as it pertains to interacting with people. There's a whole next level with these AIs that generate video. And before I dive into that, because I also have to let you guys know that I do use some image generation in my process. So in Photoshop, and it's been there for quite some time, even before we reach AI thing, there's this thing called content aware fill. And it also plays along with just some things that have existed before the term AI got popular, which is called machine learning. The technology that allows you to, when you type in on your phone keyboard and it kind of knows what you're going to say next, or how you spell things, or it remembers that your friend name Jermaine or whatever, that is an algorithm in itself that is learning based off of how you type. That's machine learning. So that's almost like the precursor to AI, you know? So it's usually happening on your device. It's not going into the cloud, and it's not stressing out any motherboard somewhere using up water. There's this thing called content aware fill that started out using machine learning. So essentially, or how the problem was solved, a lot of times I would have a square image. Just imagine a square image, say it's a picture of a tree. And a lot of times I would get this square image and someone would say, we need to turn this image into a Facebook banner, for example. And previously, the only way you could use that square image as a Facebook banner is to just zoom it and crop it. And a lot of times the end result would just be horrible. It would just be horrible. You'd be so annoyed that, oh my God, how am I supposed to make a wide image from a square image? Or even sometimes you might have an image that's just under the size you need it for to be put on like a flyer or something that you need printed. What content aware fill would do, a great example is say, it's just like you just need a little more headroom or a little more sky, a little more sky. Content aware fill looks at what's already in the image, and based on an algorithm, it says, okay, you need a little more sky. Okay, based on the available sky. So you could select the sky in your image. It could extend the image. So remember how I'd say I needed to make the image wider or taller. It was able to extend it a bit on the side. This helped a whole lot. Like say if you do a photo shoot where like maybe you're shooting on a colored backdrop and the backdrop is really tight and you need to just get a little bit more breathing room around the subject. That is so key. That is so key. Now, that technology has evolved now where it is using AI now. Obviously, I'm biased to how I'm using AI, and feel free to call me out on it. So I take an image and I need my image to be expanded in a certain way, and it's using pieces of the already available image, or it is using some database, because Adobe and the licensed images of, okay, this is what 1,000 skies look like. Okay, based on this sky, I can extend a little bit more sky. That is an essential part of my creative process, and I can't hide or go around it at all. I get missized images all the time, and you might just need to extend it. You might need to make a banner out of it. And, a client may really love an image and want to use it in various formats. With just the power of machine learning and artificial intelligence, we can make it possible. So obviously, in my biased opinion, that is a use of AI that I quite enjoy, and you know what I mean? I need it. Yeah. Straight up. Like, it's something that I use in my work, and it's really hard to not have it. A lot of times too, you get images now where maybe someone is wearing a shirt that has copyrighted brands on it. Before, you would have to have a little bit more retouching skills to say, all right, let me remove this Adidas logo, let me take some black from here. Whereas now, you can just like sample a part of the texture of the shirt, and the AI kind of helps in the rest to just remove that logo. The person who didn't know they weren't supposed to wear an Adidas shoe to a Reebok commercial, we don't have to make a big stink of it because it's possible for us to just take out that logo in a couple seconds. To me, that's really helpful. It's really helpful technology. In the digital age, right? There's a lot of inventions that kind of come, and like any form of technology, there's a good way to use it and there's a bad way to use it. And, bad actors can really ruin things for people. A great example is Photoshop. With the advent of Photoshop, it allowed a lot of people to falsify information. It allowed people to create misinformation in the same way that bad actors can use image generation to create false information, to create harmful information. It's not lost on me that some people are using it to remove the clothes of people's images to create what is seen as child porn. These are genuinely terrible things. Nefarious behavior and nefarious intentions are always nefarious behavior and nefarious intentions. Someone can take anything and find a way. Like people who have bad intentions will find their way to use things for negative purposes. Just the same Photoshop that has made a career for a whole demographic of people. People have used it to create propaganda to do the same thing that people can do with AI. AI has just essentially made it easier for a lot of people. And it just kind of intensified the amount because at least there's a learning curve to Photoshop and a learning curve to some of these things where with LLMs, you can just type in your nefarious intention and it is just made in front of you out of thin air. I can't lie. That shit is terrible. But from where I stand, I put more blame on the intentions of people than the tool itself. Like something like, say, a weapon, like, a pistol or whatever, and how we have more control laws. My hope is that regulations will come in and do what it is supposed to. Again, I understand if you may think that's naive, but that's what I believe. The same way we've managed to make refrigerators and air conditions, easier to use in the world. The same way we've found how to make cars more efficient and more environmentally friendly. We're now experiencing regulations around social media. We're seeing so many rules about what can be done with and without social media because social media is still young. But I'm sure a lot of you are seeing how many different court cases and how much harm social media has done. And let's be honest, we know a lot of us can't put down social media or get rid of social media despite how much terrible things have happened due to social media. These regulations start to control what social media is allowed to do and not allowed to do. And with artificial intelligence, this is where I feel we are right now. I feel like we're on this frontier where we have this new thing. I do genuinely believe that the bubble will pop. I do believe that, because I don't think the amount of money that is being invested into AI, I don't get the impression that they are making it back. And I do think that it will cause some economic problem, like financial economic problem. And I think that the cost of AI will go up, because the cost of AI is really being subsidized a lot so that more people can use it and essentially get hooked on it. That's what they're really like. Social media, they're trying to get you hooked on it and then reach a point where they can charge you what they really want to charge you at the cost. So I do believe that the AI bubble will burst. If they were to roll back some things, for example, like if you were to say, all right, Yannick, could you go back to a life without AI? I won't lie to you. If they took away content aware fill and generative expand, I'd be so mad. But if it means that image generation goes with it, I would be for it. If they got rid of LLMs, I guess I have to admit, I would be against it, because I'll be honest, it's incorporated in my everyday life. You know what I mean? I feel like LLMs have helped me achieve so much things I felt like I could not achieve because I had ADHD. I feel like that is really like the crux of it. And I didn't plan for this to even be a conversation about neurodivergence and ADHD. And I don't think I even lived the hardest life with ADHD, honestly. But there are some things that are really hard. You know what I mean? Like organizing your thoughts and putting things in order. Like things are so clear in my mind. Like someone's like, okay, let's do this thing, and it's so clear in your mind, but they're like, oh, give me a pitch about it, and just being able to allow that person to see how you're seeing it. Sometimes it's so frustrating because it feels so clear to you, but it's like, all right, I have to go through the process of deconstructing the noise in my mind to help this person to understand my idea and buy into that idea. It has it has just helped it has just helped me so much in terms of just genuine mental spatial awareness. And maybe somebody might look on that and as a dependence, and I wouldn't fight you on it. I don't feel like I'm dependent, but yeah, it definitely feels like a support system. I'd like it even to liken it to the medication that I use. So I don't take ADHD medication every day, but the presence, like just knowing that if a day is particularly hard, or if there's a task that is just above the threshold that I'm able to achieve, medication is there as an option for me to achieve it. That was like a big thing for me in terms of getting medication for ADHD. And I definitely didn't come into this podcast episode to make that comparison, but just even conversing with y'all, honestly, that is a lot of how it has felt. That I don't use it for everything, like I definitely feel very much so independently creative without it. And I don't really get ideas from LLMs, but what LLMs help me a lot to do is organize the ideas I have. It's just organizing it in a way that removes the friction between this great idea in my mind and organizing it into something tangible that not just I can action it, but the people on my team can more clearly understand what it is that I'm trying to achieve. And that has just been a really big game changer for me. Like AI generated movies, AI generated influencers, all of that stuff. To be honest, I don't think all of that stuff necessary. So I can see where it can be used for good and I see where it can be used for evil. As an artist, like for example, I know like say animators and VFX artists are severely underpaid. I don't love like things like that existing that kind of undercut those talents, you know? Just like, ChatGPT undercutting graphic designers and all of this stuff. I think there was like maybe like a documentary where the AI generated like some stuff like how it looks like for like a sperm to enter an egg. When I heard that, I was like, oh, that kind of interesting because it may be hard to design that in a way that is like narrative, but a VFX person can definitely do it. I'm not for it because that stuff just feels, it generally feels lazy. Most of the time, it doesn't look great. I've seen some applications where people kind of just use it transitionary, like meaning say if you have like one video and two video, you might use like some AI generated footage to kind of stitch between it, which I've seen some genuinely cool applications of it, like, yo, that's really dope. But it's not something that I feel like is necessary. There are so many talented VFX artists, and I don't think that elaborate VFX are a necessary element in film. What I think those are, I think that's a luxury. So I feel like if you want the luxury of like flashy VFX and transitions and all of that stuff, I feel like you need to just pay for luxury. You know what I mean? I feel like you need to pay for those things because as somebody like me, who I'm not great at VFX, I have I have achieved many narrative, many video things without the need of VFX. You know what I mean? Like if I can't afford it or there's no budget for it, there's definitely a way to achieve it. So I don't feel like that is like a necessary thing. I rate LLMs the highest. Then image generation comes in like second, and then like video generation. I feel like I don't feel like it's necessary. As well as I do believe that that burns up the most water. And even on the topic of water, that sometimes I feel like people ignore. Like it's a thing people need to kind of be cognizant of. AI isn't the only thing that requires a data center and clean water and all of these things. A text input into an LLM is burning far less water and generations and heat than you watching a Netflix movie, because when Netflix has this giant server, as you know, the movie is not on your computer. It's being sent across the internet. And when you say, all right, I need to watch this movie in 4K, that uses processing power from a data center. So I'm not saying this in support of AI. I'm saying it in terms of an awareness that some people are viewing AI as like the worst thing ever, where definitely it's doing some bad stuff. But at the same time, if you're like, okay, AI needs to go because of how much water it's using, then I think at the same time, we all need to do an audit on our carbon footprint. How much energy do I burn when I watch Netflix? How much energy do I burn when I'm constantly refreshing Twitter? How much energy am I burning with my TV? How much energy am I burning with my fridge? Just I think it's an opportunity for us to see, everything that we use and find important. What is the environmental impact that these things all have? AI is just the most recent and the loudest thing. And to be fair, it uses quite a bit, especially in the image and the video generation aspect, because all of these data centers require RAM and storage, that the price of storage and RAM has started to skyrocket. So, real people, even some people who have supported AI, they are now coming around to see where, oh, wow, me generating this little text prompt is actually coming around to bite me, where a hard drive that costs $100 now costs $300. So that's definitely a big problem. I'm not a fan of Slop. Like, just genuinely, you know what I mean? Chat GPT flyers, let's just be straight. Please stop using them. Canva gives you so much for free. If you just have to use a template and just change the color scheme, yes, it's going to take you a little bit longer, but it's way better than these ugly chat GPT files. These AI influencers, they're just weird and disgusting. Let's not. The AI video generation, also let's not. I know there's even a section of people who they're writing whole books in AI. Yeah, let's not do that. You know what I mean? Like, if you have something to say, have something to say, and there's nothing wrong if you use AI to say, okay, is there a more effective way to say it? Is there any perspective I'm missing? But I have definitely glanced, like, influencers selling books recently and looking through some of the pages, and I'm like, I know that this came right out of an LLM. Let's also not do that. Image generation using people's likeness, let's not do that. Let's just be careful with image generation overall. Please, like plagiarizing other people's work, pretending to make things. There are some companies that are making AI, like full advertisements with AI. Please, let's not do that. Let's really not do that. Like, if you are a medium to large size company and you feel like it's important to have a 30-second ad on the internet or TV, please spend the money. Like, we know it's AI, and it doesn't say anything good about your brand. Please stop doing that. People are catching up with these technologies, and you can fool them sometimes. But you can't fool them all the time. And the cost sometimes of when audiences can pick up AI usage, especially where usage, you risk damaging trust with your audience. And the cost of trust is, when you break trust, you don't just break trust in one area, you compromise trust all across the area. I think there was like a bank that made like a whole AI ad, and that's like the last type of company that should be using AI overall. You know what I mean? Like, banks, like, trust and banks go hand in hand. Like, no. When you are trying to deceive people, that's definitely an alarm of, should my money be here because you are trying to deceive me? I definitely feel like there are spaces where AI should not be used, as mentioned. I do believe we should have an internet and a world where things that contain AI or were made with AI, if they had to be labeled like made with AI, I would definitely be for that. Even if I use my content aware fill and it goes across and thing, and there's like a thing that, like a symbol that certifies that this was extended with AI, is fine, because I'm not trying to trick you. I'm not trying to hide the fact that, okay, I needed more room, or I needed more room here. I'm not trying to hide that. I definitely want to hear what you guys have to say. I want to hear what you guys think. And I'm definitely looking forward to hear what you guys have to say. This is a One Power podcast. You don't know if you can share this episode with somebody. If you can direct them to the YouTube, sharing the snippets that you see on Instagram, commenting, rating us on iTunes, rating us on Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. It helps a whole lot. It helps other people to join the community. And it also helps me to hear from more of you. And it helps me to enrich the conversation. So again, I just want to thank you so much for your time, as it means so much to me. And I look forward to our next episode. And yeah, just continue to bless up yourself.